Yeah, what I'm going to be, I think that the title says it all. What I'm going to be talking about are looking at AI, but how humans can link to it and potentially upgrade how we are. So not necessarily having AI acting against us, as we were hearing in the previous panel discussion, but perhaps upgrading our own intelligence by linking with AI. And we'll see how that goes. We'll progress through a whole series of practical experiments. So what I'm going to describe, this isn't like the MIT version of we could do this and we can do that, meaning they haven't done it. What this is all about, sorry about that. What this is all about is practical experiments that have been done. Hopefully you can take it from that to see what is also possible because of the experimentation. First one is a very simple one to start with. This is a younger version of me, and I'm just at my GP, my doctor, and what he's implanting in my left arm is a radio frequency identification device. So now there are quite a few people that have these things, but at the time, now it's called biohacking. I mean, nobody had a word for it at the time. This was just me having an implant put in by my doctor. What it looked like was not the thing on the left-hand side, but the thing on the right-hand side there. And you can see it has a coil of wire. That's how it gets its power. So it doesn't have a battery or anything like that. And essentially in my building, my university, we had big coils of wire in the door frame. And with this implanted, as I walked through the door frame, so current was induced in the coil, and simply a bunch of chips in the coil with a code on it, which, as the coil acts as an antenna as well, this was transmitted back to the coils of wire in the door frame, which were linked to the computer. So essentially, with this in place, the computer knew where I was at different points. It's the same sort of thing as a smart card going through a building or around a building. What it did for me, to demonstrate, as I walked down the corridor, the lights came on for me. As I went to the laboratory, the door opened for me. As I came through the front door, said, "Hello, Professor Warwick, it's really cool stuff, you should try it yourself," and so on. Now, I don't know, it's the same technology. Does anybody have a cat or a dog with a chip implanted? Yeah, there's several. Audience, don't be shy, you can. Audience participation, thank you very much. Several of you do. You can feel happy that your animal is very much into the future already with the implant, and that the technology was fully tested on humans before your animal received the implant. Now, talking of testing in animals and so on, we've been hearing things about artificial intelligence, and very often people perhaps have a narrow-minded view about what artificial intelligence is. Some people think it's a program or whatever. Some people allow it to learn, but others think that's not right. Well, what I want to describe is a different form of artificial intelligence. And in some ways there are philosophical arguments. Is this AI conscious? Could it ever be conscious in some way like a human? Well, this you might feel is interesting. You see the gold little dots on there with a black ring in the middle. What we do typically is take brain cells from rat embryos. Rats tend to be not particularly popular, so it's ethically not too bad. And we separate the brain cells using enzymes and then put them in the black rings there. Now, these are living brain cells, and we have to keep this little dish there with the brain cells in it in an incubator at the right temperature. We have to feed it regularly because this is living tissue. Now, very quickly, although we've separated the brain cells, if you're looking under the microscope, very quickly the brain cells put little, what look like tentacles out. And these tentacles link up with each other. And of course, the brain cells that are close together start sending signals to each other. And you have very quickly a complex network there. I mean, it's quite amazing to look at it as that what happens. After about 10 days, we have a complex network of brain cells. Typically, with the two-dimensional array, we're looking at 150,000 brain cells. And when we've got that, we will pole round. When you see the little gold electrodes, these send signals into the dish where there is the brain cells that are culturing, that are growing. And if there are passageways, which undoubtedly there are, through the brain, then we can stimulate that passageway and get an output on another electrode. So we will pole round, and when we're getting maybe a 20% of the time on a response on another electrode, so there's signals going through the brain, we give that little brain a body, and a robot body, so to allow it to move around and hit or detect objects. And in this case, all we're trying to get the robot to do is to detect an object and move to the right. So I'll show you what I mean. Here's one of our little robots. All we want this to do, it's got ultrasonic sensors, like a bat sense, ultrasound sensors. When it gets close to an object, the sensors will detect the object like that, and then the signal goes through the brain, and the output from the brain causes the robot to turn right. So the robot, and then sometimes, because this is only a 10-day-old robot, of course it doesn't get it right. You know, be good on it. You know, it's got to learn, which it will do over time. So the only time it turns right is when the brain wants to. It might do that when there's a stimulating pulse, but of course it might do it for other reasons, because it feels like it, whatever. And it might change its mind. It might decide, well, I was going to do something else. But because this is a brain that we're talking of. So here it probably detected the wall, a sensor certainly did, but it didn't turn. So that particular pathway through the brain wasn't. This time it did. Every time it does that, every time it does what we want it to do, that particular pathway through the brain is energized. And the basic principles of neurons are, if one neuron fires and fires another neuron, it strengthens the connection between the neurons, which means it's more likely to fire next time, and the same pathway to be energized. This is a process called Hebbian learning. It's the same for all of us. If you're driving the same route day after day, after a while you think, well, I'm not even thinking about this. It's automatic. I didn't even think about driving. Well, in a way, it perhaps has become automatic. There's still signals going through your brain, but you're not even thinking about it. You've learned by habit that's what you're doing, so you just automatically do it. And that's what we can see with the robot. We can see how these connections develop. We can see how the robot is learning over time. So now you saw how it was after 10 days. Now we're going to skip ahead, the same robot, the same brain, after 2 months. So what the robot has been doing is what you're looking at, going around in the corral. Quite a boring thing, but that's all we want it to do. It's only a little robot. And now we see how it is after 2 months, having done that, and how it's learned by habit to avoid hitting the wall and turn right. So you see, that's what it does. In fact, we see it is sort of relatively boring doing this. It detects the wall, turns right. This, I have to say, is a good example. They don't all turn out this well. Some of them are still a bit hesitant. Some of them are a bit bullish, and they go around and still crash into the wall, even though they're not supposed to, and so on. But you can look at reasons for why they haven't quite got it right, and reasons when they do get it right. The other things to say on this now, we can also use human brain cells. In fact, for us, the human brain cells are easier to get hold of than the rat brain cells. And we can culture not just in 2 dimensions, but in 3 dimensions. And that takes the number of brain cells up to about 60 million. So what we have now are 60 million human brain cells in a robot body. There's all sorts of questions there, but one question is that conscious? I mean, humans typically have, speculating number 100 billion brain cells. So 60 million is not 100 billion, but 60 million is quite a reasonable number. And these are human brain cells, the same brain cells that we have and so on. So is it conscious or not? So when a philosopher says a machine can't be conscious, well, what do we mean by a machine? What do we mean by artificial intelligence? There are forms where we're getting biology and technology working together. Are they so different from what we have or not, maybe? Was mentioned about the work I do on Parkinson's disease. And I work with a consultant neurosurgeon, Tipu Aziz, at the Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, with patients, but helping to improve the technology. Now, for Parkinson's disease, a treatment that is available for quite a few people is deep brain stimulation. And what happens in this is that the surgeon will drill down into the center of the brain, into the thalamus or the subthalamic nucleus, right in the center, you can see with the red part there, and we'll then put a spindle down into the brain, and on the end of the spindle are 4 or 6 electrodes. And quite simply, the surgeon will use the different electrodes to pick which one is the best one to use to provide a stimulating pulse to the patient. And what happens is typically the patient is given a pulse of frequency 150 hertz, 150 cycles per second, 180 hertz, that sort of frequency range, which to the surgeons he says it's high frequency because of brain signals. To me, it's quite a low frequency from a communications point of view. Now, what I'm going to show you, sorry about the quality of the video, it's a bit fuzzy, but what I'm going to show you is a person who has Parkinson's disease, and he's received the deep brain stimulators, both on the right side and the left. Because some people just have Parkinson's disease on one side, so they would only need the stimulator, the electrodes on one side. But this person's got Parkinson's disease on both sides. So, and you'll see the assistant switch on the power packs. Interestingly, the power packs are positioned here. And this is a wonder of the process of evolution, because as part of the body is concerned, we haven't really got much here. If you do that, you can hear it echoing in there. It's quite empty here, which is brilliant for putting pieces of technology. So heart pacemakers and so on, all the power packs go here, and that's what happens here. The power packs are here, and they can be inductively switched on. There are then wires underneath the skin going into the electrode. So what you'll see here is the person with Parkinson's disease. They will then switch the electrodes on, and you'll see how they are with purely electronic stimulation of the brain. It doesn't have any chemicals, the dopamine or anything, which is typical treatment, doesn't have any of that. Purely electronic stimulation. You see how the brain changes its behavior due to electronic stimulation in a specific region.
In 2 minutes, what was the status of Mr. Plasmon when he was referred to us by his neurologist in Belgium. And you see him before surgery without drug, unable to stand up by himself. He's helped by Patricia Limousin, who is a neurologist in our group. And he's not able to do anything of, as he will tell you, makes your life looking like normal. He's not able to walk. He has having dystonia, which are muscular contraction, deforming the different joints. And this is the best he could do without the drugs, with the help of people around him and mainly his wife and friends.
Oh, video stopped. Didn't stop when we looked at it. I'm very sorry for that. Can I just ask for you to try and get the video going somewhere? Okay. Well, what you were supposed to see, which has stopped for a great shame, but there we go, is that the assistants will switch on. You missed the nice punchline, as it were, that the assistants will switch on the power packs, and suddenly he's free from the Parkinson's disease and is able to walk around and so on. So very sorry that didn't happen. It happened earlier when we were testing it out, but obviously something's gone wrong in the meantime. What I wanted to say in terms of artificial intelligence, the stimulator works through purely electronic stimulation, and you'll have to believe me that the guy here can walk around and so on. What we're doing is not just using the electrodes to stimulate the brain, but also using the electrodes to monitor what activity is going on in the brain. The electrical activity is going on in the brain. Now that electrical activity is fed from the electrodes into an artificial intelligence system which learns a number of things. One thing it learns, because artificial intelligence is very good at classifying. And here, it can classify through the electrical information that's coming in what type of Parkinson's disease the person has got. And this helps the surgeon, so that the artificial intelligence system can say, well, this is a type A Parkinson's disease, or type B Parkinson's disease, and type C, and so on. So the AI system essentially is modeling part of the human brain in order to understand it, such that the treatment can be better. The second thing an artificial intelligence system often is good at doing is prediction. And that's what's good here. By monitoring the electrical activity in the brain, it can predict sometimes 10 to 20 seconds ahead of time when the tremors that we saw before and the muscle locking that you get with Parkinson's disease, when it's going to start before it starts. So what we're trying to do with the surgeons is to make the stimulation, which I was hoping you'd see on the video, to make it only work on demand by the AI system, rather than stimulating all the time, which is what you were supposed to be seeing there. One interesting feature of this is the patient is in hospital in Oxford, and the AI system is 35 miles away in Reading. And you have to sort of ask, well, hold on a minute, what does this mean? Because the part of their brain, effectively, is in reality an AI system that's in a different city. And this is one thing, obviously with artificial intelligence, you get networked intelligence, and if you link human brains with AI brains, you can start to get that way. You don't have to be limited to your brain being in one place in your body. And we'll see that even more with the next experiment. Now, this video is working. This is a guy called Campbell Aird, and he's lost his arm due to cancer. He's been given this robot arm, but you can see him flicking the switch with his human hand, his left hand, in order to control, and this one has stopped, there we go. He has to flick the switch, we're really going well today, has to flick the switch with his human hand in order to get the robot hand to move around and the elbow to operate and things like that. What we really want is for somebody to control a robot hand directly from his brain and to feel what the hand is feeling in his brain, rather than to flick a switch in order to do that, for someone else to flick a switch. What we need to achieve that is an interface from the person's brain onto the wires and back from the wires back up to the person's brain. Let's assume for a moment we've got an interface that does that. You can send brain signals onto wires, and you can send signals from wires up to the brain. Okay, we can give somebody an artificial arm or leg if mechanically it's okay, and it could operate the same as their regular leg that they had before. But also, we can connect the brain and the nervous system up. It doesn't have to be arms and legs. We can connect it up to a heating system. We can connect it up to a building. We can connect it up to a car. You're looking at the body, as we know it, taking on a completely different form. Essentially, as long as we have an interface that does that, it means your brain and your body do not have to be in the same place anymore. And what your body is can be very different to what you have now. This is the last experiment I was involved in directly. There's me on the operating table in the Radcliffe Hospital. There were 4 neurosurgeons involved, because this was the first time the implant, which is looking there, that's the BrainGate implant. This is what was fired into the nervous system, my median nerves in my left arm. I have to say I didn't need this for medical purposes. This was a scientific research project. There are 100 electrodes there. Each spike is 1.5 millimeters long, and the electrodes are about 3 micrometers in diameter, so very, very small. But brain cells, nerve fibers, 10 micrometers is a typical size, so you're really getting a very high resolution of signal in terms of measurement and stimulation. So I had this implant in my nervous system. We could link up from the wires and so on my nervous system to a computer and then onto the internet, and I did a whole series of experiments as a result. Through some holiday snaps, I'd like you to have a look at some of those. This is one of the first ones. On the baseball cap are ultrasonic sensors. We saw the sensors with the little robots before. It's the same sort of thing. So it's an ultrasound. What it gives you is a sense of distance to an object or something else. Now, what was happening here, you can see I've got a blindfold on, ultrasonic sensors on the baseball cap. As an object came closer to me, my brain was receiving pulses of current that increased in frequency. So the closer the object, bing, 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 bing. As an object was further away, bing, bing, bing. And what you get as a sensation is not that you can tell this object is 2.53 meters away or whatever. It's not accuracy in that sense, but it is accuracy in the sense that you've got a feeling of how far an object is away, and if the frequency increases, it's moving towards you, and you can feel very fine movements, or if it decreases slightly, it's moving away from you slightly. You can detect those movements very accurately. This was my wife. She helped in a number of ways with the project, as you'll hear. And she's wearing some jewellery that a student at the Royal College of Art put together. And the jewellery was linked to my nervous system. So I'll give you a little picture now. I'm calm and relaxed. My wife's jewellery is blue. I get excited. My wife's jewellery flashes red. So she's not in the university, she's in a completely different office. There she is, the jewellery is blue, fine, he's not doing anything he shouldn't. And then the jewellery starts flashing red. What is he doing? And more importantly, who is he doing it with? So I think this was perhaps not the best part of the experiment. This was a picture taken at Columbia University in New York. If you're going to do a connection like this, you might as well go to New York to do it. And perhaps you can see the little picture on the computer screen was of the robot hand, same one that we saw on Campbell Aird's arm, in fact, the robot hand, which was in the UK, was in England, Reading. So what happened? I was in New York, I closed my hand, my neural signals went across the internet to close the robot hand. So I had like a third hand, which was a robot hand. But not only that, the third hand was across the Atlantic Ocean, because with the internet you can do things like that. And when the hand closed, there were sensors in the fingertips, and from those, signals were sent back across the internet to stimulate my nervous system in the same way. So increased frequency, the hand's gripping an object more, decreased frequency, it's not gripping so much. And what I was trying to do was to open and close my hand in order to open and close the robot hand so it just gripped an object. And that was very successful. There was about 1/3 of a second delay in each way, but that wasn't a problem, it seems, for the brain to follow. So we can see there that somebody who's lost an arm could potentially have a robot hand and control it from their own nervous system. And this has been used. The same technology has since been used for paralyzed individuals with the same implant positioned in their motor cortex, so that although they can't move, they can, by thinking about moving, control a robot hand and in one case feed themselves and so on. So the technology has been used for therapy. In our case though, the biggest thing for me was the communication aspect, and for that my wife helped again. She had electrodes pushed into her nervous system, and we electronically linked our nervous systems together. So every time she closed her hand, my brain received a pulse. And every time, ding, 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 so ding, ding, ding. Got 3 pulses like that. So what we did was a basic form of telegraphic communication from nervous system to nervous system. And quite clearly can see here that in the future, it won't just be from nervous system to nervous system, it'll be from brain to brain, and it doesn't necessarily have to be human brain to human brain. It can be human brain, machine brain, and vice versa. Thank you very much.